Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello everybody and welcome to Future Hacker. I'm your host, Maria Taide, and today we're talking about the future of the gaming and entertainment industry with Jane Hoffacker. Jane is Senior Director Creative Management at Activision Blizzard, the world's largest independent video game publisher. She's a founding member of Chiefs Los Angeles Network and co-lead of the Technology, Media, and Entertainment Subcommittee for Women Executives on Boards. Previously, she was a general manager at Riot Games, where she led the launch of League of Legends in key international markets. Hi, Jane. It's amazing to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for having me here. I've been looking forward to doing this for such a while.
We're super excited to have you here and to be talking about such a cool theme. And, this is such a massive industry, right? Experts predict it could generate $200 billion by 2021. And the forecast is that soon, about 1/3 of the global population will be gamers. You've been into the industry for a while, so please share with us your journey and what were the main changes in gaming behavior you've noticed since you've started.
Yes, and thank you so much for the question. I started my career actually at an indie game developer before having the opportunity to join Activision to work on Guitar Hero, which was right when the music genre was at its height. And that was really my first taste of expanding an entertainment franchise. We took it to new platforms like mobile and the DS, and we expanded to new musical genres too, like pop or hip hop or electronica. And on top of that, we were creating this expansive downloadable content catalog, or DLC. At least in the States and Europe, I don't know about Brazil, Guitar Hero was really a household name. And around that time, World of Warcraft was also breaking industry records, surpassing 10 million players. And so, really thinking back, I think I was so fortunate to start my career at a time when, gaming, my lifelong passion, was hitting all these milestones and sneaking into the mainstream attention. Honestly, it just felt really validating emotionally to have my nerdy obsession with interactive entertainment being shared with so many other people. And, it was also fortunate in the sense that I had just given up this coveted career in private equity, to start completely over in video games. And, I got disowned by my parents for a little while. It was very dramatic. But I think when they started seeing headlines about the games that I was working on, it really helped them to kind of come around and understand me a bit more. When I moved over to Riot Games to help them launch League of Legends in South Korea, I remember feeling really convinced that I was embarking on the next evolution in gaming. Back then, free-to-play PC games were already massively popular in Asian markets, and it was so novel to not only bring that business model to the West, but also pioneer a new standard in player experience to not sell power. And, that's something that I think feels really commonplace nowadays, this idea of free-to-play and not selling power. But back then, I remember going to matches of free-to-play pay-to-win shooter games where someone could pay a lot of money to buy something like a nuclear device, and with one click of the button you can instantly kill most of the map and basically instantly win. And I'm sure it's fun for that one player to spend a lot of money and decimate the entire map, dozens of players with a button, but it's not really a great experience for everybody else. So anyways, there I was about to launch this game and this business model in South Korea, and it was super intimidating. I mean, Korea is a very, very deep red ocean for online PC games, a lot of fierce competition from Korean-made games. And fortunately, and I say this with great humbleness because I really believe fans are as much a part of a game success as the product and team, we succeeded in that market. And we really couldn't have done it without something like esports, which for me marked the beginning of what was this very gradual cultural trend of moving from physical to digital. Esports is something that also feels pretty obvious in gaming today, or trendy. But growing up, I remember watching StarCraft matches on cable television in Korea. And, it was just like you would watch sports on TV. And I wondered back then, why you didn't see stuff like this anywhere else. And now it's a lot more common, which is great. Anyway, in that chapter of my career, I got to see really firsthand this expansion of gaming from in-game experiences to secondhand experiences like spectating and esports and cosplay. So I want to just plant a flag to say that era, the 2010s, is where you really see the beginnings of gaming as a way of life. More recently this year, during the COVID lockdowns in the States, I came back to Activision to work for Pelle Chanel. He's the chief creative officer. And what I'm doing is I'm managing the creative office and working with him to innovate creative across Activision Blizzard and King franchises. I'm just really excited to help these really iconic and in some cases really seminal gaming experiences connect more deeply with fans and really connect across a wider audience. Overall, I just think right now is a super interesting time for games, but it's also a really interesting time in human history. In my lifetime, at least, I've never felt before that so much was at stake for us. Our environment, social justice, our values, and our ideals. I know the States is pretty polarized, but I think it's also a global thing like Brexit, but also in Brazil, I understand there's like a lot of polarization right now. There's a lot of suffering too, like people are suffering from diseases, the COVID lockdown, climate change, institutional discrimination, poverty. There's just a lot that needs to get better. And what motivates me to stay in gaming, which admittedly feels frivolous when you think of all these like serious world issues, is that I'm seeing that it means so much to people. And I don't mean to make games more important than things like food, shelter, clean water, anything like that. Absolutely not more important. But, we've really seen gaming play a significant role in people's lives these days. It helps keep friendships and relationships alive, even when we're all forced to stay apart, right? I guess I'll close with a couple examples, like the Call of Duty franchise, for example. We're seeing over 2/3 of these players playing in groups of friends. And World of Warcraft, I mentioned earlier that it broke records as the first online game to reach 10 million monthly players. It just celebrated its 16th year with Shadowlands, which is its expansion, and it's breaking all these launch day unit sale records. Overall, whether you're playing to stay connected or just trying to find escape from the pressures of the day, I just feel like gaming matters now more than it ever did.
Such an awesome experience you have, Jane. I love it. And, I couldn't agree more with you. Gaming is such a good escape from everything that is going on out there. I'm a gamer as well. I don't know if I could say that, but I do every day, at least a little bit, just to relax, right? And Jane, you've written about this gamer label and some of the problems with it being maybe too much of a gendered term. Are you a gamer, and what's wrong with the term?
For the record, I love that you're like, I'm a gamer, but I don't know if I could really say, like, yes, you're a gamer. In my book, you are. I've played games all my life. I've built friendships over games. I've pulled all-nighters over games. I should have gone to class, but I stayed up too late kind of situation many times. My problem with the term gamer is that it's just such a label with strong connotations. At least in the West, a lot of people associate gamer with this like lonely, pimply male in the basement of his mother's house with Mountain Dew and old pizza boxes stacked around him, right? And in case you're wondering, like I'm a middle-aged Asian mother of one. I have pretty good skin in my office next to my kitchen, and I have Mountain Dew and pizza stacked around me, right? So like, even though I personally experimented with calling myself a gamer, it always felt like a half-truth. And I just really always hated feeling like the exception, like the girl that was accepted into a boys club, right? Like you just feel like a foreigner. Something that's interesting, there was a story on NPR that came out a long time ago, which was about how sometime in the 80s, there was this notable mysterious drop in the percentage of women in computer science majors in the US. And it was weird because like female representation in other STEM majors was on the rise. And also when you think about the early 80s, personal computing was becoming widely available, right? So like, why is computer science majors dropping? It went from the high 30% to like the high teens. So it dropped pretty dramatically. And they were looking at the chart and, this drop started in like 1984 or something. And at the end of the day, the NPR story was highlighting that researchers attributed that the fact that people were marketing computers as basically toys for men and boys. And so it was kind of gendered in that way. But it was also pointing out 80s movies like Weird Science and War Games were basically helping to spread this image of male genius nerd. And that same image lives on in shows like Silicon Valley. If you go back to the 1930s, programming was actually seen as women's work and men's work was really hardware, right? And that's kind of interesting. So somewhere between the 1930s and the 1980s, like this big cultural shift happens. And you see the signs of the shift happening in the word nerd or geek, right? And I feel like gamer really inherits a lot of baggage from those two labels, right? Like it's almost synonymous. You think of gamer, you think of geek or nerd. And it kind of like echoes a sentiment about how personal computers were marketed as toys for men and boys, right? So just overall, I believe that just as women were turned off by comp sci majors because of labeling and Hollywood making them feel like they didn't belong, I feel like maybe women are also turned off by the gaming or gamer label because they feel like they don't belong. Recently, Activision Blizzard Media did a study supporting this called The Gallery of the Gamer, and it's available free online. It included over 21,000 people in the US and Western Europe, and all these folks play games, but 60% refuse to call themselves gamers. Maria, can you guess what gender dominated that group?
No, tell me.
I thought it was going to be women, right? Based on everything I just told you.
Exactly.
Actually, it's men. Like 76% of that group that didn't want to call themselves gamers were men.
Really? What's behind that?
In my mind, when you think about the worst stereotypes of gamer, the loner, the pimples, dark basements, like no girlfriend, sociopathic behavior, like I'm really not that surprised that like people don't really want to embrace it. So that's the problem, I think, with the gamer label. Overall, though, I feel like gamer even, it's just too small to describe this aspect of our lives. I feel like gaming really isn't a hobby. I mean, we don't consider watching TV a hobby. I'm not a TVer. I'm sure you don't consider yourself a TVer. What does a TVer even look like? I mean, it's like anyone and everyone, right?
That's such a great point you made, Jane.
Yeah, just gaming right now is the common part of a lot of lives, and it's cultural and it's beyond a label.
And I just love all this background that you gave. It was actually a great lecture. For example, I had no idea that on the 30s, programming was actually seen as a woman's work, and how things changed because of all this stereotyping, right? So moving on to the business model, just like we see in the IT industry, with the change of legacy local systems to those cloud-based software as a service contract, the gaming industry trend is also the game as a service. So instead of going to a retail store and buying a CD, as I used to do when I was young, games are run online as a service and free to start. And companies are making revenue out of the user engagement. And this is a major shift in the business model, and it increases the reach to anyone with a phone nowadays. Could you tell us about this new profile on both companies and gamer side?
Yeah, sure. And unpacking your question a bit, you mentioned several trends that you may not have known have already been happening in gaming over the past decade. I'd say this consumer trend towards digital downloads and streaming away from purchasing box products is something that we've seen happening for a long time. When I started in the industry, I mentioned downloadable content or DLC, and that was really an early manifestation of this trend towards downloading. And the speed of conversion since then has really been more driven by technology. As internet bandwidth has gotten faster and cheaper, it's just become more practical for the average consumer to get games this way. Of course, the first-party platforms, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, they were all instrumental to this movement as well. They unlocked a lot of this by building platforms that could really leverage the internet connectivity. And obviously, more recently, COVID has really accelerated the shift to digital because people are just looking for more ways to get together while having to stay apart. And so overall, it's not even a trend that's really specific to gaming, and you end up seeing very similar behavioral shifts in cord cutting for television, or the shift to streaming and music that we saw a few decades ago. All this being said, though, I wouldn't give up on discs. The last generation of console, or the latest this generation of consoles, is I think a good example of what's happening with discs. They're not dead, they're basically a feature now, and depending where you live, the disc might be the best way to receive huge gigabytes of data, or you might be still purchasing discs because collecting might be a part of your gaming ritual. Overall, however you install game content, what's really important is discovery and access. How do you find your content, and how convenient is it to get what you're looking for? These are the things that vary widely over different geographies and demographics, right? Using myself as an example, as a consumer, I don't personally select a game because of its business model. I select a game because it's fun, my friends are playing it, and I'm able to access or find it. Generally, I think my selection criteria is pretty universal, but, my network, my personal taste, and what's accessible for me as a middle-aged Asian mom working in California, it's totally different than maybe a Black teenager in Sao Paulo. Overall, I see the future in meeting players where they are. A great example is just Activision Blizzard. It's really committed to expanding key franchises across platforms and business models. Bringing Call of Duty, this big premium console experience, to mobile as a free-to-play is just an example. And generally, success as a franchise these days is just being able to serve a variety of people, needs, and wants.
It makes a lot of sense, Jen. And you know what? It was such a great way to start our podcast. You just gave us this great background about the gaming industry, gaming entertainment industry. So we just discussed what's been happening from the last decades to nowadays, and what are some of the trends in the business model. So I'm going to end this episode now, because on the next episode, we're starting to talk about all this cross-screens entertainment and the new technologies applied to gaming. So stay tuned, everybody. We're going to continue with Jane.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.